I'm Des Thompson, Principal Advisor for Biodiversity in Scottish Natural Heritage, and at the moment I'm heavily involved in taking forward the 2020 challenge for Scotland's biodiversity. I think Scotland's incredibly important for wildlife because in many ways we've got outposts of important habitats, plants and animals. What's so special about Scotland is the sort of combination of land management and climatic conditions, giving up really vivid wild country, the sorts of mountains and heather moorland that we see, the Machar lands that we find in the west of Scotland, the uniquely special green space that we have around the green belt. In total, the landscapes and habitats we found in Scotland are not replicated anywhere else in the world. If we think about the wildlife in the uplands of Scotland, it's something at a cusp at the moment. If we go back in time, there's been a steady loss since the 1940s of many important upland habitats. You think of heather moorland, you think of some of the rough grasslands that have been very rich for wildlife. A lot of these have declined through intensive land use. It's only really been in the last 5 to 10 years that we've seen a turnaround where we can point to some upland areas where we're seeing heather cover improving rather than declining, where we can see peatlands improving in terms of the restoration work that's taking place. So it's at this very important cusp at the moment, and with more effort, more encouragement being given to land managers, I really think we can recover many of the glories we've lost in the past. When we compare the lowland farmland areas with the uplands, it's quite clear that there's been much more intensive use of farmlands in Scotland. If you look at the arable areas, it really is clear that, again, since the 1940s, we've lost a lot of the richness of arable farms. I mean, I like to think of one bird, a lovely little bird called the corn bunting, which used to be found everywhere in Scotland across farmland, indeed across much of our lowland farmland in Britain. And that's declined to the extent now that that bird is only found in 3 regions in Scotland, and in each of these regions that little bird is struggling, and it's struggling because of the intensification of agriculture. And you need only look at some of the lowland farmland areas and peer over the fence and look at the fields and look at the crops in there, and there really is very low diversity of wildlife. There's low diversity of plants and therefore of invertebrates, and therefore food and space for birds. Thinking about the uplands, there are probably 3 principal threats. The first comes from pollutants, and a lot of these pollutants come from out with Scotland, mainly in form of nitrogen deposition, in particular from roads, heavy industry. And these benefit a narrow, select range of plants, but they really do for the sort of rarer, more specialist plants. So pollution is one. Second relates to agriculture and various forms of agriculture, in particular relating to livestock grazing and burning. And the third really relates to more specialist land uses where you've got intensive management for red grouse, for red deer, or for other interests, where in some parts they're out of kilter with what the landscape, the habitats and the wildlife can sustain. For farmland, the use of different chemicals, which of course are important for controlling pests and other things that don't benefit agricultural production. But some of that intensification really does for the food resource, for the birds and other animals. And of course, the loss of weedy patches in many fields simply reduces the amount of habitat available to much wildlife to seek sanctuary, certainly in the larger fields. So I think you can summarise the main threat to lowland farmland in Scotland as arising from intensive agricultural use, the use of chemicals and different practices. The great thing with CWEB is it's spelling out the importance of different features and the factors driving the changes, raising our awareness and sharing what knowledge we have about what's happening to these areas, and then really trying to tackle the different policy drivers. Some of these are very good, so in terms of agriculture, all the time trying to ensure that agricultural policy delivers much more for nature and for wider benefits of society. But we're also trying to harness some of the good forces that are out there. You look at in schools, for instance, the real upsurge in interest in schools, in nature about us. We want to see that increase. We want more people to go out and enjoy nature, and as a result of that, really promote the importance of nature for society. I think for wildlife in Scotland, we're at really a defining moment in time. I mean, you think of the great programmes produced by David Attenborough and others, and the enjoyment that people get from these programmes, the wider awareness and importance of nature. I think in Scotland right now we're really coming to appreciate the importance of wildlife and coming to appreciate what wildlife can do for us, not only in terms of our health and well-being, but importance of healthy wildlife and healthy ecosystems for providing more food, more enjoyment, more security, more resources for us. We're at the stage where we may see this step change in our appreciation of nature and therefore the management of nature for the better of us all.